Welcome, everyone, to the Hope Report, your light in the darkness, brought to you by the Lindell Recovery Network. I am Jason Perry.
And I'm Melissa Hooray.
And we are so pumped to be with you for our second episode. We're not really calling these like our episode 1, episode 2. These are kind of prequels to our launch date. We just kind of wanted to make sure that with the launch of Frank, that we were here for you guys. And with all the news that's going on, we know that everyone could really use some good news right now. So
that's true. Jay, I want to thank you for your hard work getting our first episode up. You made a valiant effort and a lot of work to get it up there. And I know it's our first one, but I was pleased with it, and I hope it reaches a lot of people.
I think it will. And a lot of people will go back. Like as we continue to polish this and as we get our sets built and everything else, and the program evolves, people will go back to see what did we start like, and we'll probably be horrified then. But right now, it was pretty good. I thought it was a pretty good debut launch. Thank you for being so candid and honest, and getting vulnerable with your testimony. That's always hard. As you know, today I will be doing the same thing.
I'm looking forward to it.
So let me get into my testimony now.
Yes.
Unless you want. So Melissa was kind enough to share her testimony last week, and I want to get into mine this week. So you know who it is you're talking with or listening to, and eventually when we can take phone calls, hopefully in a month here, who you're going to be talking to and what our background is. So my story is, it's a little long. I'm going to try to give you a full version, but not the in-depth encyclopedia version. So my story actually starts with my grandfather on my mother's side. My grandfather was an orphan in a notorious orphanage in Newfoundland, where he was, raped and sexually abused by priests. And this soured him on religion and soured our whole family from that point on religion. So I was raised without God. In fact, there was a negative viewing of that. And one of his favorite cuss words was he would say, you take the Lord's name in vain all the time. And he was just so broken because of what was done to him. And, if I had to give a theme to my testimony, it's this: we're all born with a hole in the center of us. And your child, your kid, when you have them, whoever is going to have that hole. And you better pour God into it, because the world is going to fill it otherwise. And that is what happened to me. And then we get wounded, and that hole becomes this tear in the middle, instead of it being, a place where you're a vessel to receive the Lord, it becomes this, shredded tissue where your heart is. And that hole typically happens when somebody reaches, in their upbringing. So for me, my mom and dad had me when they were 16 and 18. That didn't last very long. So of course, my mom's 16 years old, has me. We're a welfare family. I was exposed to violence at an early age. And my mom at that point, I can't even imagine. I mean, for a long time, I carried around a resentment of my mother because of the way things kind of turned out. But, now as an adult looking back, I'm like, I can't even imagine having a kid at 16 and being under them circumstances. So my mom eventually got remarried and had 2 more children. And when she was 16, she gave me my grandparents to raise me. She wanted to go off and party and find herself and all that stuff. It was the 70s. I was born in 1972, for those of you wondering.
So was I.
So, she wanted to go find herself. So my mom gave me my grandparents, which hurt. So then she gets remarried and brings me back in and has 2 more kids. My middle brother had Down syndrome, and my youngest brother, Ryan, did not. So she ended up catching him cheating on her, and she left him. And there she is. She's a mom of 3. She's now 23 with 3 kids on welfare. Like, I remember sleeping in front of the stove in winter because we couldn't pay our oil bill. So we would heat it with the kitchen with the electric stove to to stay warm at night. And eventually she decided that wasn't good for anyone. So she gave me to my grandparents. She gave my middle brother, Brandon, up for adoption, and she kept the youngest brother, Ryan. Well, this completely destroyed me because one, I absolutely loved my middle brother, Brandon. And my mom, it seemed like my mom chose my younger brother to me. She, talking to her as an adult, she thought she was giving me a better chance by going off with my grandparents. So anyways, a long story short with that is I get traded around my family for a long time. So my wound, the whole purpose of this is to tell you, but my wound was abandonment, right? My wound was abandonment. I didn't feel like anyone ever wanted to fight for me or wanted me, that I would just irritate them and I get shipped off to the next person and the next person and the next person. So this wound is there with me. And what happens is I don't have God to help me with it. I don't have anything to help me with it. My friends all let me down. I mean, that's just human nature, right? So I fall in love with a girl, and, and that was my piece, my first like true love, right? And all my hope was in that. And when that fell apart, my wound evolved. So here I am. I'm like, okay, so, this girl, didn't work out, crushed me, broke my heart harder than I ever thought my heart could be broken. And so then I became the wounder from that point on. I said, okay, I'm never going to let anyone get the best of me from that end. So from that point on, I became the cheater. I became the liar. I became the manipulator. And my goal was to inflict as much trauma as I could, while making myself feel better with like conquest and womanizing and all those things throughout all this time. During this time, I was 16 years old and I was working out and I was big. And I was hanging out with guys from the gym. So I started bouncing in a nightclub. I lied about my age, said I was 18. I'm bouncing in 21 and older nightclubs. And next thing you know, I start dating older women and then, lying about my age. And I'm like, why am I going to school at 16? So I dropped out of school at 16 like a knucklehead. And I was a good student when I wanted to be. I could easily get an A if I wanted it, but that wasn't where I was at. And I went off and got a job in the Teamsters Union. So here I am. I'm living on my own now. I'm 16 years old. I got a nice car. I'm 17 now. Got a nice car, apartment, leather couch, everything that an immature, 17-year-old thought would be the key to life. And then the recession hit and I got laid off. And then I really turned into a absolute scum of the earth, basic criminal that just never got caught for anything. And I did that for about 3 years until eventually here I am at 20 and I'm like, what am I doing? I'm going to, I had no hope. Right. And I'm so glad this is called the Hope Report because when I had no hope, there was nothing I wouldn't do. There was no, I'd break any law. I'd do whatever it took because I had no hope. I didn't think I could go anywhere. I thought my destiny was already written. So I was just thinking temporary joys to get me to the next phase. And some people would use drugs for that or whatever. But me, it was just, trying to, hook up with another girl or whatever. And so at 20, the light bulb went off and said, I'm either going to end up in debt or in jail. And I didn't have God at the time. So, but I was patriotic. I love my country. And so I decided that I was going to join the military to redeem myself. I figured I'll serve my country. That'll redeem for all the things that I did being a knucklehead growing up and save lives for the rest of my life and protect America. So the Marines had a really cool commercial. I didn't know, back in the day, I remember it was a chessboard with Gothic music and slaying the dragon. They have the best marketing of anyone out there. So I went to go join the Marines. And when I got there, they're like, hey, how you doing? Let's see your high school diploma. I'm like, I don't have one. I have a GED. They're like, can't take you. I'm like, man, the Marines won't take me. Well, what am I going to do? Well, Rambo was cool. He had a couple cool, well, maybe I'll go be a Green Beret. Army, the same thing. I'm like, man, Navy? I don't want to be in Navy. I like girls and I don't want to be on a ship with a bunch of dudes. Again, you can see my maturity level here, right? So I'm like, man, all right. So Air Force. I guess I'll go talk to the Air Force. I don't know what I'm going to do in the Air Force. I start daydreaming about being a pilot or something. And of course, they weren't even working. They don't work on like on Thursdays and Fridays. They take the long weekend every day, every week. So I go in the Navy, and because I remembered a friend of mine was a Seabee, and they get to carry guns, and they're not on ships typically. They build bases, and he was making a lot of money driving a big wrecking crane. So I went in there, and they couldn't even help me, but they took my number. And then they called me back. They said, they took my number and they said, hey, we have special programs that come up from time to time. We might give you a call. So they called me a few months later and they said, we want to see how dumb you are. Come down here. So I come down there and I take the ASVAB and I smoke the ASVAB. And now everyone's calling me. And I said, well, I'm going to talk to the Navy first because all you guys are too cool to talk to me in the beginning, and we're going to see what we can do. So I go down there for my job description. I'm like, I want to be a Seabee. And they're like, well, Seabees are full. We want you to be a nuke. And I'm like, a nuke? I'm like, guys, I got a GED. They're like, no, your thing says that you'd be really good at being a nuke. And I'm like, no, I'm not going to be in a nuclear submarine or on a reactor in a boat with a bunch of dudes under the ocean. No, that's not happening. They're like, and then they're like, well, what about gas turbine, this, that? And I'm like, no, I'm not going on a boat. I want to be a Seabee. And they're like, you realize this is the Navy, right? And I'm like, yeah, I get it's the Navy, but my friend was a Seabee. I'm going to go to lunch. I'm going to come back, have a cool job for me. So I come back from lunch and they hit me with some other job that was like technical. And I'm like, no way. And then they were like, well, you're an in shape guy. You ever thought about being a SEAL? And I'm like SeaWorld? Like training dolphins and sea lions? I love sea lions. And they're like, no. And they, and they slid the paper over and it read like a James Bond novel. And I'm like, why didn't you show me this from Go? 6 years right here. Boom. Pow. So I signed up for that, went in.
Wow.
And tried to fill that hole. Like before I was filling it with women or alcohol or drugs or whatever. And now here I am and I'm trying to fill it with camaraderie. Right. Mm-hmm. I figure here's a group of guys that will never let me down. We're going to be tight as the brothers that, tighter than anything I've ever known. It's going to be amazing. Right. So I go into that, and the SEAL teams are a very interesting place. You have a complete, you are a rock star. Everyone likes the SEALs. Everyone knows about them. They have their own groupies. And you're a professional athlete traveling the world, training, doing all this stuff. And before the wars kick off, there's not a lot going on other than training and practicing and training and deploying and being on standby and training. So it turns out to be, you're just on this worldwide tour, shooting guns and blowing stuff up, but you're also a rock star in the nightclubs at night and having a great time. And here I was pouring all this in, and it wasn't filling the hole inside me.
That must have provided a huge amount of validation, just being welcomed into this elite group. Like, we want you to be part of us.
Yeah, well, there wasn't a welcoming, right? You have to prove yourself. That's like, if people ask me, what was your favorite part of the military? My favorite part of the military was actually BUD/S training, which is the hardest part of the military, because there, just surviving every day was an accomplishment. So you had measurable accomplishments every day as more and more people left and rang out or fell away, and you were still there progressing, right? So it was validation on a daily level. And yes, it was suffering, and yes, but when you suffer with people in a general mission, you have a bond and you have that camaraderie. And in BUD/S, there's not a lot of turning on one another. That happens later. In the beginning, the officers in the beginning of their career, in BUD/S, it's run by enlisted guys. So it's beat into them to take care of your men. That doesn't last very long after training, unfortunately. So BUD/S was just a place where everything made sense. You had standards. Standards were either met or they weren't met. And you were either there at the end of the day or you weren't. You could eat as much as you want. BUD/S is not a starvation school. You've got great food. You're in San Diego and you're living on in a beachfront condo during the training. Now that it's not the nicest place, but literally the surf zone is 100 yards from your door, right? So again, it was amazing, right? my first attempt at buds, I got stress fractures in my legs and I got sent to, I got dropped. I got sent to the hospital for 18 months and I came back. And the second time I went through, I ran and took my stress fractures all the way to a break, but I made it through Hell Week with a broken leg.
Wow.
And so they kept me and then I was allowed to heal and I continued on. So I was at buds for a while. And again, like I said, I loved it. It made just a place that made the most amount of sense. And every day you're just working out at least 2 times a day and learning cool stuff and just laughing more than you would imagine, because in Misery with the right people, you just spend a lot of time laughing. And then, I went out and went to the SEAL teams, went to the East Coast, and it wasn't what I thought it would be. It was a lot more high schoolish than I thought, where there were guys I had tight bonds with and there were some great times, and, and I miss that camaraderie more than that's the only part of it I miss, going back. But, my brokenness and that hole in me was still affecting. I was not nearly as good of a SEAL as I could have been if I had filled that hole with God beforehand, because I was still dealing with the issues. I was still a broken person. I was still going out and partying and trying to find happiness in other ways instead of glorifying God with my performance. So I was doing things that were counter to me being, I was out in the bars with my buddies every night because I craved that camaraderie.
During those times you were searching for all these different Band-Aids to fix that pain and fill that void. Did you ever feel the tug? I know you had said you were an atheist and you didn't have an upbringing.
Die-hard atheist. Yep.
Did you ever feel that pull of there has to be something more than this, or, this leads to emptiness? No,
my indoctrination into secular reality was so strong. Anybody who didn't believe in evolution or the Big Bang was crazy. They believed in Santa Claus and the Easter Bunny, and Jesus was just another one of those things. And I would purposely seek out Christians to try to use my logic on them and to try to shake their faith. And I remember at one point, I was in buds during Hell Week, and guys were praying there at my table for God getting them through to that point. And I lost my mind on them. Like, nobody got you through this. You guys did the work. No one did. Just how stupid and how vain of me, right? But atheists are angry people because they want to be there to be a God. They just can't believe. They just find themselves hung up on in the religion of atheism, which is this belief in random nothingness, instead of divine creation, when, science is going to prove God. I've never been afraid of science. I'm not one, I think the Christian church did a lot of harm in the beginning, running away from science during the 80s and the 90s. And, and it made us all look pretty bad at some point. Whereas I think now we find out, what? There was a really big flood that shaped everything. It wasn't the Colorado River that carved, or whatever river it is that carved the Grand Canyon. It wasn't a little trickle over billions and billions of years. It was massive amount. And I get to see that with my own eyes here when we had some flooding here. It just changed everything. And now that we've seen that happen, they're like, you know what? Something did happen. There was a worldwide flood. And that's becoming out now. So everything that God said back in the day, in this book right here, is turning out to become more and more true, and not what they tell you. So the other part is I remember I'm terrified of heights, right? And here I am, a SEAL, and I'm jumping out of planes for a living. And I remember being scared to death up there, and I had to put on this big pose like I was jacked up, and I'd have the most angry music playing in my head or in earphones, whatever it could, to get me angry, because anger was my fuel. Anger got me through my entire life until I found God. So it was where I could go when I was scared, right? And I knew if I could get angry enough, I could do anything, right? And that's what got me through training. But I was sat there and I'm like, man, these Christians, they're so lucky. If they go out there and they jump out of this plane and their chute doesn't open, they're going to paradise. Whereas if my chute doesn't open, I'm going to be worm food at best. But I didn't
thought that.
Yeah, I really thought that. Right. And I'm like, man, if they're right, but I'm like, there's no way they're right. So I, continue to serve. I go to Iraq. I go to Southeast Asia. I go to South America, Kosovo, Germany. I've been all around during all this time. And I'm still dumping everything I can into this wound, and I'm just degrading. I'm not happy. But I did love my job because it was the status. It was my identity. And then when I was gone, I lost my little brother to a heroin complication. He got hooked on. When I stayed behind, my mom kept him. And like I said way back in my story, and he just went down a very different path. And it started with OxyContin. And then OxyContins, after he stole from everyone and did everything and conned everyone because he couldn't afford oxys, he got on heroin and then went down a very dark path. And I remember going to his funeral, and I was at his funeral, and none of his friends were there. And I was furious. I'm like, how could they not be here? And I cornered one of his friends that was there, and I said, where is everyone? And like, Jay, they're already all dead. They're already all dead to heroin. An entire class or generation around him just wiped out to drugs. And that was the kickoff to the opioid epidemic of the time in the Northeast. And I'm like, so I'm like, all right, I'm out of here. I'm tired of making other countries safe and not my own. I'm going to go fight in the war on drugs. So during that time, I went to, I made that decision. So while I'm over in Iraq, I pass a kidney stone, and they have to take some imagery for that. And they find a mass on my kidney. And then they find a mass on my lung, and then they find a mass on my adrenal gland. And they're like, Jay, we don't know how long you're going to be around. So, they offered to send me back, and I'm like, no, I'm staying. So I stayed in Iraq, finished my tour, came back, and they're like, hey, over Christmas vacation, or Christmas leave, we don't know get your stuff in order. We don't know how long you're going to be around. So I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe I went through all this stuff and I'm going to die of cancer now. This is just amazing. So they sent me to shore duty to get this all taken care of. They sent me to Panama City, Florida. And when I was down there, Panama City, Florida, as you know, was a party capital, right? It's a party capital. And I'm married at the time. And I'm down there, and I'm like, you know what? I am not going to waste away as a cancer patient, be this 98-pound dude who's just a shell of himself. So I just started living like a rock star when I was down there. It was an easy job. I was on instructor duty and all this stuff. And I just went down this very continued to be destructive. Marriage was falling apart. We really grew apart. And our plan on there was we were going to divorce and go our separate ways. I was going to go to Boston, and my ex was going to go to Charlottesville, Virginia, where her family was, and just cut our ties. But while I was there, so then it turns out I don't have cancer. And I didn't want to come to God weak, right? I remember saying that. I'm like, everyone's like, well, have you thought about it? I'm like, no, I'm not coming to God weak. I'm going to come to him on my terms. So vain, so stupid, right? So here I am, I think I'm dying. And then it turns out the thing on my lung was artifact. It was nothing. The thing on my kidney turned out to be a giant blood blister from a parachuting accident. And then my adrenal gland had a mass on it, and they went in, they pulled it out, and it turned out to be cancer. So I went from you're definitely dying to nothing.
Wow.
Right. And I'm like, man, so now I'm really partying. And I'm like,
and how old were you then? About 20?
So no, at this point I'm in my 30s, I would say.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm in my 30s. I'm coming towards the end of my career. So I went at 20. I'm like 36, 37, we'll say. And this book makes its way into my life. Called I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist. My ex brought it back from work and thought I might want to check it out. So this is an amazing book. I don't know if I've talked to you about it before.
Yeah, you did.
Yeah.
Who's the author?
It's Norman Geisler and Frank Turek. And I don't know if I'm pronouncing Geisler's name right. It's Geisler. But this is a science-based book that goes into the probabilities of this being random chaos. And what it shows you is that it takes far more faith to believe in random chaos than intelligent design. Right. And then it gives a case for Christianity and how we know the Bible's true and how we know it's authentic. Because, of course, I would say, how can you trust a book that was written over thousands of years and this and that? And they go into how many different manuscripts they had and all the different things they had. It's just a remarkable book. And it was key to me being saved. And I used it as well with my wife, Lauren, who was an atheist herself. And that's another story where.
What prompted you to even pick it up and read it or have any interest in it?
I don't know that part. I don't recall why I thought I'd check it out. I've just sat there and I said, I was always a scientist. So if this was a science book on faith, I was open to it. I just couldn't bear to believe that it was true. I wanted it to be true. I just thought of myself so intelligent, and so rational and so logical that there's no way that this is true. So if there's some science out there, I was open to science. Science was my religion, right? So this started speaking to me in my own terms. So then I went to an alpha class. So this book took me from atheist to agnostic in its pages. And I'm like, I'm going to give Christianity the first shot at this because he wrote the book that got me here. So I went to a alpha class in a Methodist church, and it was cool. I said the sinner's prayer and asked for Jesus to come in my life. And I remember getting a feeling where this is going to sound crazy, but my whole body was tingling from head to toes. It was almost like I was hypoxic. I've been hypoxic before, getting ready to do the underwater 50-meter underwater swim in BUD/S. You just hyperventilate. You build up so much, CO2 in your system that your whole body just starts tingling every square inch. And it was like that, except I wasn't breathing like that. And it was this incredibly warm feeling when I asked God to send the Holy Spirit into me. Yeah. And I'm like, I just must have imagined that. I just rationalized that away. That's crazy. But I became a Christian, and I'm like, hey, I'm going to Boston. And I remember telling my alpha minister that I was going to, and he's like, oh my God, you're so lucky you're going to Boston. You need to go to this church called Park Street Church. That's where Gordon Hugenberger is. And I'm like, Gordon, what? Like, Gesundheit. What did you just say? And it turns out that that Gordon he's a genius. And he is he's in the oldest church in America, which is Park Street Church. It was the tallest building in Boston forever. It's been there. It's been a part of the Underground Railroad. It's a part of America's birth and foundation. And it's got an amazing history. So it was right up my alley. So I go there. My plan with my wife is we're still going our separate ways. I go up there, I go to Park Street Church, and I meet Gordon Hugenberger, and I become friends with him. And Gordon is a very special guy because Massachusetts is the right armpit of secularism, and as San Francisco is the left armpit. So here he has all the college professors from all around coming to him that are in Harvard, that are in, you just pick a college. Boston's got more colleges than them. They're coming to Gordon to be reaffirmed in their faith. And so his sermons are like PhD level courses. And they were amazing in what I needed at that time for me to be an intellectual Christian. I was not spirit-filled yet. So I was in intellectual scripture, learning what it meant to be a Christian and all these things, but I didn't have the heart healed yet, right? So my ex, she wasn't my ex at the time, decides to come up to Boston, wants to give it a go, and she thinks having a kid is the way to do this. And I was stupid. And I agreed to have a kid. And of course, it made things worse. And then our kid turned out to have autism, which was a level of difficulty beyond anything that I could even imagine at the time. And that just completely, just destroyed what was left of our marriage. We tried to slow things down. I was on the SWAT team in Boston. I had the best job, cool job. Here I am, riding around a motorcycle during the days and doing SWAT team stuff on the other time. I mean, it was a great job, getting paid good money. My ex was nurse anesthetist, so she was making good money. So we're both making bank. Life is great as far as that, except our marriage absolutely is terrible. So, when my son was diagnosed with autism, we realized that we had to throw as much of that as we possibly could. And when you're on the SWAT team in Boston, you don't have a life. You're always doing, you're either just working normally, you're doing escorts because you're also the motorcycle team, you're doing dignitary escorts, you're doing warrant service, you're protests, the whole thing. So I stepped away from that and moved to Charlottesville, Virginia. And I needed a job doing something that paid well because we had bills that were, that went along with the salaries that we had. We adjusted to a lifestyle. So because of my background and because of, my contacts, I got a job bodyguarding a guy worth $52 billion. And I got to do some amazing things, travel around the country, but it was great because I could live anywhere in the country and they would fly me in for 30 days and then fly me home for 30 days. So it was back to being in the military where I was kind of in and out the whole time. And that's what I was doing here when, and then I started my gym. And let me clean this up because where we broke, I had a couple different things there. So I came back, I was doing that and I was like, you know what, if I'm going to do 6 months out of the year gone, I might as well be in the military or something. So instead I started my own company called Trident Shield, which was a gym and an active shooter training company. And I was training, heroin addicts in the morning for free to try to get them to, find some value in their lives and get some pride and to get away from it because I thought that was the way to fix it. I was helping veterans who were, who had PTSD and was trying to get them to mentor other people who were getting ready to go in the military and all that. And during this time, my friend Mike Ferrugio was trying to get me to ORW and, Operation Restored Warrior. He's like, you got to go. It's great. I'm like, I'm fine. I'm a solid enough Christian on my own here, even though I'm in the middle of a crisis of faith. And he's like, he finally talked me into going by convincing me that it would give me skills to help the heroin addicts and the veterans with PTSD and everything else. And I kept putting it off for a while, but my favorite place on earth is Lake Tahoe. And for ORW for once, which is normally in Colorado, was in Lake Tahoe that one time. And I'm like, that's it. I got to go, man. I got to go. This is the one I'm going to. So I went out there and I met Paul Lavelle and I went through this amazing experience where they introduced me to Jesus and I got the healing that I had. I identified my wound, which was obviously, as I said before, abandonment, and got the healing I needed. And it changed me 180 out from what I used to be. It was huge.
How long ago was that, did you say, when you went to RW?
I want to say 2015. 2020, maybe might have been 2014. Again, it's all kind of a blur. My wife and I met in 2013, so I'm thinking it was about 2014. And it was funny because my wife, I remember telling her before I went to RW, I'm like, listen, I got to figure out what I'm doing. I can't stay in this middle of me either being agnostic or being a Christian. I need to figure it out. I go, do you want to come on this journey with me? And she'll tell you in her testimony, she's like, yeah, I'm going to get rid of this stupid Christianity stuff. We're going to be fine. I got them. No problem. And of course she was baptized a few years later. Both of us got submersion baptized together on stage and it was amazing. So I go to RW and Lauren will tell you, because I was sneaking calls with her, even though you're not supposed to have technology. I was sneaking calls where she's like, by like day 3, my voice changed. Like there was so much peace in my voice and all the anger was gone. And And it just, that's why I got to tell people, I know so many intellectual Christians that until you're spirit filled, you're not where you need to be.
Right.
Right. So that's really my born again date, is when I got spirit filled at ORW. When I finally met Jesus and came to an understanding and finally reconciled my problems with the Father. Right. I've always had a problem with father because I didn't have a father growing up. My grandfather, did the best he could, but my dad was gone, and, he had another family. And again, that just contributed to, me having more resentment. So because I didn't have this father figure, I took that out on God, right? The Supreme Father.
Yep.
So anyways, I do that, I come back, I tell, I never wanted kids in my life. Once I got healing, I instantly wanted to have kids. It just became part of who I was, and Lauren wasn't there yet. So, because she was still an atheist at this time. So in order to save her, I started a small group in my house with the sole purpose of getting Lauren saved. So we pulled in all of our tight Christian friends and we made it fun. We drank wine, we did, different studies, and we had a blast, and we actually saved 3 marriages throughout it.
That's amazing.
And it was just absolutely an incredible experience that we had doing that. And at the end of it, Lauren gave her life to Christ and was baptized in it. And we're all doing that. So anybody who wants help ministering to their atheist spouse, I can help you. I can tell you what worked for me. Anyways, so
you didn't have any resistance to the small group. Hey, we're going to have a Bible study or have a bunch of people over.
Lauren's always been exceptional, and I said it was important to me. And I'm like, I'm not trying to say you got to believe this, and just check it out.
Yeah.
And she was like me. She was willing to explore things because she didn't know nobody wants to believe that you die and then you're in the dirt and you're warm food and that's the end. Right?
No, no one wants that. Our eternity is built into our hearts.
Yeah. So, anyways, it was funny because I remember I had finally reached my breaking point. We've been doing this small group for a while, I think almost a year at this point. And I'm like, you know what? You're not going to come around. It's okay. You don't. She's like, well, how do you know I'm not ready? I was like, reverse psychology
there you
was
go.
the one thing I didn't try soon enough. I should have tried that sooner. And she's like, I'll show you. And next thing you know,
pretty effective.
We're giving our testimonies. But the thing that I want to tell everyone is your testimony is never over. Like that's where I typically wrap my testimony up right there. And since then, there have been ebbs and flows in my walk with the Lord. And my latest breakthrough was a massive breakthrough. And it wasn't too long ago. It was earlier this year, like January. I'm one of those guys where I think I can outwork any problem. Right. If I have a problem, it's my job to fix it. And, and I'll just outwork the problem until the problem's exhausted and I'll beat it. Right. Mm-hmm. That's my thought. That's the seal in me. And here I was trying to, I'm one of those guys where I'm a perfectionist when I'm doing things. So when I'm trying to do a project, I want everything to be the best. So step 1 has to line up with step 600. Right. And if it's not perfectly straight line, I'll sit there and be like, okay. And I'll try to, through a force of will or whatever, and try to do all that. And of course you can't control what's going to happen in the future. Right. So my prayer life at that time was, Lord, help me, give me business, this, that, because my company Trident Shield was doing amazing before COVID-19. We had a record year. We were looking at our pipeline. We were going to 5X our record year. And then COVID hit and we went to 1/10 of our current pipeline. And, and that really rocked me, and I'm struggling. I'm trying to outwork this. Right. So I'm praying for more of this, more of that. God help me, God help me, God help me, God help me. And you're supposed to petition Lord with your problems. Right.
Right.
But I never put him at the focus of it. And my life really changed once I figured out that, and I prayed the most dangerous prayer you can ever pray. And I said, Lord, you made me for whatever reason, you made me for a purpose. You brought me to this point. I give you permission to send me anywhere. I just ask that you send me in your will, not my will, your will. Send me where you will. I won't put any restrictions on it. If you want me to go to Africa, I'll go to Africa. If you want me to go to California, I'll go to California. I'm not going to put any parameters on it. If you have a mission for me, send me and be obvious about it, because I'm thick-headed.
Yeah.
You know? And within 2 days, I was talking, on 2 opportunities popped up for me. One was this podcast out of nowhere. I had no idea.
Within 2 days?
Within 2 days, my company got a massive order in, and things just started like taking off like a rocket ship in all aspects of my life. The house that we ended up, we're going to be moving to Tennessee, which has been my dream. Got a dream house with 44 acres down there that I can shoot, do a ministry like I want. I want to start a church down there, and I want to do a mentoring ministry, teaching people how to mentor, because that's really a lost art that we've lost, that we all need. And you talked about that in your testimony with your daughters, how you talk to your daughters and you're there mentoring them and all that. And it's so important. And I just didn't have a mentor. And it caused me to drift and do all kinds of things and have a very painful experience until I started finding mentors. And I've acquired some good ones now. And my life has been exponentially better.
That's an amazing prayer that you said. And I think I met you early on in the midst of that, or when Paul brought you into the picture.
That was about a couple months after that, or no, we talked on the phone actually, not too much after that, because of I had to write several proposals and different things, and then he brought you on board to talk about it. And that prayer is stand by, but you have to mean it. You can't say God send me and not take off, the training wheels. You can't put parameters on it, right? And just say, I am done living for me. I'm going to live for you now. And all I want to do is to the glory of God. And every day, let every day be a testimony on my faith and my love for the Lord. And, because until I did that, I was without a fuel source. Like, this is the one part that I thought ORW kind of struggled with, or I struggled with post ORW, which is a part of the Lindell Recovery Network, was they got rid of my anger, right? But they didn't give me another fuel source. Yeah. So I was like this, I was just adrift without having anger to fuel myself. And it was so challenging not having, that incredible Hulk strength when you don't want it, or that intensity when you need it, and knowing that I was sinning if I was doing it, and it was just like, man, like everything was taken away from me that made me who I was before. And then once I could switch that fuel source to glorifying God, then everything took on meaning way beyond the instant or what it was about, so.
I love how you said, be obvious, because I say that too. I say, in my human pea brain, sometimes I can't see the signs you're showing me. So please, and not being fearful or being selective of this is what I'll do. Or that, it sounds like your prayer was heard and it was a powerful prayer.
We tried to move up to Maine, and we were going to go to Maine because of Lauren's family, and they live in the southern part of Maine. And then a friend of mine's like, you're going to Maine. It was like Gordon Hugenberger again. You need to see Ken Graves. And he sent me a clip of Ken Graves preaching. And he preached like no one I've ever seen. Fearless. He talked about politics. He talked about all my biggest beef with the church. And, my axe to grind with the church is so many of the churches don't talk about today's problems and apply the Bible to today's problems. They think the Bible is for the problems of the past, and it's not. It's a part of every solution going forward. So I'm like, that's it. We are looking for houses, and I'm like, I got to study under this guy. The one house in the entire state of Maine that would take us with our 3 dogs was 12 minutes from Ken Graves.
Wow.
And then I met Ken Graves, became, close friends. And now he's one of my spiritual mentors. I'm just so thankful of it. So even though, you pray for God to open doors and close doors.
Yes.
So as a SEAL, I will kick open a door that God has closed. And that's what Maine was, right? Maine, it was the hardest move I've ever done. It was like every door was getting slammed in our faces, and I didn't want to take the signals, and I'm going to just do this anyways. And I thought I was doing God's will because Ken Graves was there. And everything went wrong when we were there. Like everything went wrong. Like my relationship with my in-laws and my marriage, which has no strife in it ever, now has strife because me and her in-laws aren't getting along at all. And it just really complicated things and just made things terrible. And then once I surrendered, like I said, once you have God has his hand on your back and you pray that prayer, everything just takes off like a rocket ship, and you know it's God's will. Like today, here we are, we're getting ready to close on a house, and like today, the enemy rolls in, and all of a sudden, out of nowhere, like 4 obstructions, massive obstructions fall in our way. And that's a test at that moment. Are we going to lose faith in God and stress out and start derailing and trying to take control of this? Or are we going to say, me and my wife sat and said, God, you got this? You know, we're on your path, your will, not ours. If it's your will that all this blows up right now, so be it. Within 3 hours, all those problems, that was bizarre.
You're back.
Yeah, the whole thing. So what was the last thing you heard there?
You were saying to your wife, you know, God, if you got this, this is your will.
Yeah. And within 3 hours, everything just completely turned around and all those things went away and fell in line. So, you know, we passed the test. You know, here we were being challenged. We could have lost faith and we could have been rocked. Instead, we just leaned into the Lord and said, okay, I'm willing to give this all up right now, even though it's everything I want, if that's your will.
I love that. It's so freeing. It's hard to give up control, but he always delivers. He's so faithful.
Yeah, he's so faithful. But like, even if he did send me to Detroit or some place where I would never want to live in a million years, you know, he's going to bless you wherever you're going.
That's
right.
true.
And wherever you're at. And, you know, I think I'm going to Tennessee for the rest of my life, but who the heck knows? You know,
you're open.
I'm open. Well, I just said, God, you know, again, God, just do what you will with me. Do what you will. Send me on any mission you want, and I'm there for it. Because, you know, you blessed me with the woman of my dreams, an amazing family. And I'm just like, as I sit here, I don't know anyone luckier than me or happier than me. Right. So, because
beautiful.
Yeah.
That really
so I'm just so thankful for it. I'm just so thankful to be able to say I'm blessed. And that's why I really feel a calling to minister. I really want to start my own church. I'm not the most well-versed in the Bible, but I know how to apply the Bible to today's challenges. And, you know, and I just need to, again, I think, thicken up my understanding of the Bible. I will start a church. And, you know, I already have a ministry on Patriot Crusader Mission, which is a podcast and another thing where we teach people again it's about mentoring and preparing and defending your family. And I just want to do that in my community. I want to be a part of the solution, and I want to build a church that's like Ken Graves' church, where, like I said, where people show up with their problems and when they need help instead of going to the government.
Amen.
Yeah.
The church should be a help center for people in need, not just someplace you go once a week or
exactly. Whenever. If the church, and that's where we have to get unlazy as Christians. Like, a lot of us just want to show up on Sunday and be done and then show back up on Sunday, and it doesn't touch the rest of our lives, right? It's just our Sunday thing or our Sunday morning thing. You'll see when you're having a profound effect on people and you're changing lives and you're bringing people to Christ, it's a beautiful thing. It's, you know, and I hope that we get these with this show, like I do a Patriot Crusader Mission, where people tell me, you know, hey, you know, I haven't read the Bible in 40 years and I'm back to reading the Bible. Thank you. You know,
that's what we hope for. Yeah.
You know, because I mean, that right there, that, you know, we've been a part of people coming back to the Lord, and there's nothing better than that. There's nothing better than that.
You're right. That's so true. I mean, just listening to your testimony, when I listen to people, you know, I'm finding connecting points, and our stories are so different, but there's so much to connect about. And even when you're talking about being a SEAL and the desire for the camaraderie, and we all need a sense of belonging in a group. And what better place to find that than with, people who love Jesus, who can share that love with you, because there's this God-shaped hole, like you said. You fill it with different stuff. And your story, looking at how God had his hand upon you is really fascinating, even though you had that generational curse on your family from way back before you were born that the enemy had a plan to take you out and to get you invested in all these things in the world, and how God drew you out of that. He was just beside you the whole time. And then it sounds like ORW is sort of the culmination of a lot of things.
It was. And again, that's why there's so many different levels to this Christian life, right? Like, again, recognizing that there's God and calling Jesus, your Lord and Savior is one thing, but then being Spirit-filled is completely different. Right. I know when I'm out of tune. When I'm out of tune, I am a different person when I am out of tune with the Holy Spirit than when I am with him. When I am with him, everything goes better. I'm the best version of myself.
Yeah, I don't think I was Spirit-filled till about 2013. And like you said, I have much more I can talk about as we go forward about, like you said, your story does not stop, and God has done amazing things. When I thought, once I get sober, life's going to be wonderful.
Yeah.
Just transformations that have happened only because of him. That he was the only one that could have saved me from some things that have happened. But it evolves. You're never like, this is my testimony in a box. It's going until you die.
And now here we are, doing amazing things, working with you, for Mike Lindell and the Lindell Recovery Network, with the ability to, reach countless people out there through Frank and through other social media sites, as well as still doing my personal ministry at Patriot Crusader Mission. And like I said, the end of this week, as of Friday, I'll be living in Tennessee. So the set's going to look very different. Yeah.
I love you just said, if the world comes for me, the Lord will provide. I feel like that's a powerful quote that people need to get down in their spirit. You don't need to fear anything in the world when God has got your back. And you can, it can look like it's going to hell in a handbasket, but God always comes through when you're living for him and walking with him.
Yeah, exactly. And, and I know I'm going to have hard times again, right? I know there's a coming. That's part of it. But, every one of those times I'm going to grow stronger. And, for prayer life, I want to, talk to people a little bit about prayer. Imagine if every one of your prayers came true, how unfulfilling your life would be, how soon you would have settled. Right. I just think of back in my life, if my first girlfriend didn't break up with me, where I would be. Yeah. I would not be a Navy SEAL. I would not be the CEO of my own company. I would not be all the things I turned out to be.
Right.
I would have, I'd be still stocking shelves or driving a forklift in a warehouse. That's fine, but that's not what I'm doing now. And and I am the happiest. I don't know anybody as happy as me. And again, I'm sure other people are, because I don't know everyone. I'm just saying that beyond belief, I wake up every morning and I am just thankful. I pray to the Lord before my feet touch the ground. I'm like, Lord, thank you for letting me wake up again this morning and the life that you provided for me. Let me live it to honor to you today. Help me walk deeper, closer with you, and help me honor you with all my actions today. And when I do that, I try to do that every morning. Some mornings I forget, or something gets up, or, the dogs start barking at 4 a.m, whatever it is.
Yeah.
But, that's my intention. And when I do that and I walk that, when I go to bed at night, there's just like, my heart just feels so full.
And I didn't talk about this in my story, but I was married before too, when I was really young, because I was living outside of God's will and I wanted to get out of my family. And same thing with fear of abandonment. I wanted to find a man and get married really young. Ended up, I got pregnant, and I have a beautiful daughter who's 26 from that marriage, but the marriage was a disaster from day one because of me insisting on not waiting on God's timing. But then years later, and like you said about unanswered prayers, and in the moment I wanted it to work out, but I'm so grateful that God showed me what the future would be like, and that he released me from that. And then years later, when I was sober, he blessed me with another life, with a beautiful marriage and 2 more daughters. And he really does redeem those years that you think you've wasted time, or I'm behind, or I didn't do this or that. And he just has a way of advancing you. I mean, way beyond what you could do in your own power.
Well, I think that's a good place for us to wrap up today. And, I got a lot of editing to do with this.
No, I just want to thank you for sharing your story, and just the ORW. I'm so grateful that we have that on the Lindell Recovery Network, and that people, even if they're not a veteran, that anyone can access that, and they don't have to be limited. Oh, I have to go to a treatment, or I have to have, a lot of money to be able to do this. That's been made available to anybody, because it's such a powerful course.
Yeah. And how would they find that?
So that's and Mike put us through it. 5 women at My Pillow, or with the company. He enabled us to go through it, and it was an amazing experience. They can go to LindellRecoveryNetwork.org, and then it's under option C. So after you get your access code by watching the featured testimonial, you can get into door C, and that's the ORW course. And the companion PDFs are in there as well, so people can do everything along with watching the videos.
Awesome. Well, thanks for listening to me today. I hope I didn't ramble.
Awesome.
I know I was all over the place. So.
No, it was great to get to know you. I loved your story. You've been through so much. You have an amazing story. And I think a lot of people can relate to many of the things you talk about. And those are a lot of the wounds that many of us have.
Yeah. John Eldredge writes about it in a lot of his works, where, as men and women, as we're going through, as we're transitioning from kids to adults, you need a rite of passage. You need somebody to take you under, their wing and mentor you and turn you in, to let you know that you've got the right stuff, to bestow that God-given identity on you. And when they don't, the world gives you an identity, and that identity is not a good one.
That's the truth.
So, well, thank you, everyone. Melissa, you want to pray us out?
I would be happy to. Lord Jesus, I thank you so much for this time today. Lord, I'm so in awe of your faithfulness and how much you love us. And Lord, I thank you for Jay and his powerful testimony, and how you had your hand upon him and were pursuing him throughout all the years of his life. And I'm so grateful that you've brought him to the place that he's at now. And just, it's so amazing to think about how our paths would intersect, even though we're on different ends of the country, and that you brought us together for this shared purpose. And I pray, Lord, that many lives would be touched through Jay's testimony. And we ask for your blessing over this podcast, that it would all be for your glory, that you would get us, out of the way to the level that we just want to do your will. We want you to show us what to do, and we surrender to whatever you want to do with this. So Lord, I ask that you bring the right people, the people who need you, people who need hope, people who are lost and searching and broken. I pray that they would find this, and that they would find hope and healing through what we're going to do. And we just thank you that you put it all together. And I ask for a blessing over Jay and his family as they travel to their new home in Tennessee. And thank you for everything you've done to just make that happen, this new chapter in his life. And I plead the blood of Jesus over everybody who is hearing the sound of my voice, and over Jay and his family and my home as well. I pray all this in the mighty name of Jesus. Amen.
Amen. Thank you so much. All right. God bless everyone.
Thank you for listening to The Hope Report. If you were blessed by this episode, please remember to like, comment, share, and subscribe to our channels.